I live right next to a Navajo reservation and have made friends with many of the people there my age. We like to hang out, play video games, and just be normal teens. I walk over a lot since my best friend lives a little less than a mile away from me. This isn't a long trek and usually only takes me about 25 to 30 minutes. I've made this trip dozens of times and have grown very comfortable with it. I know the people along the way, so I'm not scared or on edge. There is a patch of forest, however, about midway there. It's a little unnerving sometimes. There is always that feeling of being watched. This was a regular occurrence for me, so I tried to just ignore it and shake it off as my mind playing tricks on me. This day I spent more time at my friend's house than I meant to, and when I left it was already getting dark. I reached the stretch of forest, right as the sun disappeared from the sky. I shivered a little as I readied myself to begin the journey through. I was 10 steps in when I heard a branch snap. You know the sound, the one that screams there is definitely someone or something there with you. I froze, not sure of what I should do next. Should I run? Should I turn around and book it back to my friend's house? I didn't know the best option in this situation. I whispered, "Hello," hearing my voice crack as the words fell from my lips. I don't know why I even opened my mouth, but it was out there, so I listened for any reply. My heart sank when the answer came back in the sound of my voice. "Hello." I started to breathe too fast. My heart pounded against my chest. I felt like I might faint. "Hello," my voice came again, but not from my mouth. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. I couldn't scream, I couldn't reply, as my voice echoed over and over from a short distance away. I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It sounded like it was everywhere around me. "Hello, hello, hello," it repeated. "Stop it." I finally managed to tear from my lips. Everything went silent. For a long minute, nothing happened. The air grew stale, and I realized for the first time that there were no typical forest sounds. There were no bugs, no frogs or crickets. Nothing. I stood there, terrified, waiting to see what would happen next. "Stop it," it mimicked back. I'd had enough and was willing my heavy legs to move. Before I could take a step, I heard rustling in the bushes 20 feet to my left. I watched in horror as a deer head with huge antlers protruded through the brush. As it came further out and stood up on twos, I took off. I flew out of those woods and all the way home in record time. I said nothing to my mom when I got there. I just went up to my room, laid down, and thought about what happened. My mother came in at some point and asked me if everything was all right. I replied that yes, I was just tired. I don't know why I didn't tell her. I guess I might have been afraid of how she would react. I called my friend and told him everything. He freaked out and told me that no matter what happened that night, to not reply or look out my window. This terrified me even more. He said to call him the next morning, and he would explain more, and that he had to speak to his grandfather as soon as possible. That night I didn't sleep at all. I stayed awake listening to every little sound the night brought. Around 3 a.m., just as I was about to drift off, the air changed. The night sounds quieted. I felt my heart begin to pound. I lay there and waited, pulling the covers up over my head like a child, far too scared to move. It came after a long moment. "Hello," I cried. It was all I could do. "Hello, stop it." It mocked what I had said in the woods again. It was terrifying enough when it copied what I said. But then it did something new. It called my name. "Amy," my mother's voice. "Amy, Amy, come here." "Hello, stop it," my voice again. For the rest of the night, the creature outside my window called my name in my mother's voice and repeated what I said in the woods over and over. In the morning, when the sun broke through the dark, it finally stopped. I fell into a fitful sleep. I woke around 12 to my friend calling to tell me he had spoken to his grandfather and could explain what happened to me. He said there was a creature they called Yi Neldlushi, he who goes on all fours, or a skinwalker. He explained that it was an evil witch that used dark magic to transform into an animal with the attributes it required, and that it had caught my scent and knew me now. I was also given a warning that since it knew me, it would always follow me, that I would always have to be careful. Last night I heard scratching on my window, then a low hum. The creature began saying my name again, but also adding in things I hadn't said, in my mother's voice. At one point it started calling my name, but drawing it out really far, like, Amy. It tried to get me to come outside, or to open the door and let it in my house. This went on all night. At this point, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what to do. Is it seriously going to stalk the shadows around me for the rest of my life? I don't think I can take that. My first experience with the supernatural was one of the most terrible life experiences I can remember. It happened when I was young and dumb, and wanted to go out into the world and explore. While I was out of my home country of Canada, I witnessed a horror I soon hoped to forget. I had gone on a trip with some of my buddies to Montana, just below my home province of Alberta. We were originally going to stay in Yellowstone National Park, but decided to head to Glacier National Park first, before camping out at Yellowstone for a few days. We finally reached Glacier Park after a 6-hour drive and had just enough time to do a little hiking before going to our hotel in the nearby town to rest and move on towards Yellowstone. We had gotten to the park around 4:30 p.m. and decided it was a great idea to hike after dark, so we hiked up the trail looking at the glorious views of rivers and waterfalls of the Avalanche Creek Trail. The light began to fade rather quickly while we were about 2/3 of the way up, and we had hiked into the trail about 10 kilometers, so it would take us about 2 hours to walk back down from that point. This is when everything goes downhill. Myself and my friends were all outdoors men and loved to go hiking and travel around the Rocky Mountains, but we were still inexperienced when it came to night hiking. Since the trail we were on wasn't as traveled at this part of the hike, the trail was hard to follow in the dark, although every now and then we would see a sign that notified us that we were going in the right direction. At some point, maybe 1/3 of the way down the mountain, we ended up going off the trail, following a little rabbit trail. Thinking we were still on the correct path, we began to figure out that we were definitely not going the right way, as my friend checked his compass, showing we were heading deeper into the Rocky Mountains, miles and miles of forest. Then begins the mass panic. My friends and I immediately turned around and began walking the way we came. But the trail we were following didn't look the same as it had before, leading us to being even more lost than before. That is when we collectively noticed how quiet it had gotten. No insects, no birds, nothing. It was dead silence. I knew this was a bad sign, as I'm a hunter, and when it gets quiet like this, it means that there is a large predator around and that it is hunting. We had literally become prey to some unknown beast in the woods. We all began getting a sudden spike of anxiety when I let the guys know what was up. That's when we heard a noise that brought terror, a guttural howl from up the mountain. It was then followed by many more. My heart went into my throat, and the terror I felt made me shake. Most of my friends did the same, all but 2. The others had already dipped and had began running in the direction opposite the howls. We all followed soon after, running ourselves ragged until we looked behind and saw the eye shine of something that was much larger than we had anticipated. The eyes were at least 6 feet off the ground and moving towards us fast. That is when we split up, running in random directions, hoping to lose these beasts. It was never going to happen. I could hear the breathe of one of these things about 20 feet behind me and gaining. All of a sudden, my friend appears from the trees to my right, and we end up running together until I cut off from him, hoping to escape. I know I left him to die that night, but it was a last-ditch effort that worked out to my advantage. I heard his screams from my left and ran as fast as I could, away from them with tears rolling down my face as I hear his screams for help and him shrieking in pain, then nothing, as if he never existed. I continue running down the mountain until I see a familiar sight ahead of me. It was one of the trail signs showing how far you were on the trail. I stopped, checked where I was, and started running again, hoping to get away from the creatures on the mountain. Another kilometer down the trail, I began hearing howls getting closer and closer by the moment, causing me to run even harder. Looking ahead, I see the sign saying parking lot and zoom past it in my panic, looking for the keys in my pocket and scrambling towards the only vehicle still left in the parking lot, which was my car. I use my fob to unlock my car from a distance and run as hard as I can towards it, slamming into the side of my door and opening it, hopping in and starting the car. I look out of my window towards the trail entrance and see two pairs of eyes staring at me from just out of the range of the lampposts. They stare at me before disappearing back into the brush as I drive away, never looking back. I arrived at the ranger station by the park entrance and ran inside looking disheveled and terrified. I began telling the ranger at the desk what had just happened. He then looked at me with a sad face, as if he knew something like this would happen, and called up the search and rescue team to come in the morning to look for them. They were never found.